article in Woodworking Journal. This is August of 2014, if any of you are interested in it. And I'm going to pass this one around so you can take a look at it. But it's on tangential turning. Now, it sounds like a big deal, but what it amounts to is essentially, okay, it's the angle of the pieces, of course it's supposed to be more line, is tangent to the perimeter that you're going around, rather than what we normally do, pointed towards the center. Okay? Radial is, most of that stuff up there is radial. Everything is angled in at normal angles, 12 pieces, you know, added up to 360 degrees. But tangential is a little mystifying because, for example, this piece here, okay, is 40 pieces, all right? Each one of the pieces is 9 degrees, all right? But when you can see that it's angled, all right, and turned, watch what happens. As I open it up, you see how it goes more and you get more of an angle on it? Well, we all know there's 360 degrees in a circle. But when you do this, okay, you're effectively changing the angle that the boards come together. And what was kind of interesting to me, because I've had so many problems dealing with being so exact, when you open this up, all right, if you look closely now at this, you'll see that they're not tight. All right? I pushed it open too much, and the pieces aren't tight together. Now, this particular piece here, you can see it, is open on the inside. All right? The crack here is on the inside tip of the two pieces. Well, guess what? If I take one of these out, which is sometimes not as easy as I'd like to think it, but if I take one of these out here, pretty tight. If I take one out,
you got to remember the right words.
Yeah. Now, if I take one of those out and I open it up again to the same degree, all right, tap them a little, guess what? The crack is gone. They're tight together. So what I learned by doing this, if you put these together and you have a space at the tip, okay, you can take one out and it will change the angles so they'll fit better together. You can take 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. I mean, it's not critical, because when you're pushing this down, you're effectively increasing the angle. All right? If the space is in the back here, that means you don't have enough. Put another one in. Okay? It's that simple. And I mean, when I first started doing this, and when I was using this is just poplar. So I just cut it all up and did it. But you might think that this is hard to do. It's not. I'll show you why. 9 degrees, you know, you say, oh geez, 4.5 on each side. Not necessary. If you have the fence on your saw and you tilt the blade, okay, at 9 degrees, doesn't have to be 4.5, tilt it at 9 degrees, put it in here and make a 9-degree cut. They're all board length at 9 degrees. Well, what about the 4.5 on the other side?
Alex, can you hold up a minute? I'm going to move the camera so I can get a better...
Okay. The piece is shaped like that now. okay? And this is 9 degrees. So if we have this at 9 degrees, and this one here is vertical, guess what? If we square that off there like that, now we have 4.5, 4.5. And you only made one cut. Okay? The trick is make it a little longer than you need it, because you're going to be cutting some off. And if it's squared off at the bottom like that, if it's not going to come to a point, again, make it a little longer than you need it so that you'll be able to cut this off. You don't have to do that. I did not cut any of these off. These are just the way I cut them, all right? And if you look at this, I'll pass this around, you can take a look at it and see that the wide part, it hasn't been cut off to do that. You can see it's only cut in one spot. But you only have to make one good cut at 9 degrees. How do you do that? I showed you before something. I swear. At any rate, I have a digital Wexley digital angle finder, a little square thing. It's made by Wexley, and it is very, very accurate. All right. I knew I had it. I didn't know what I did. At any rate, it's not here. I must have left it home. You can tilt your blade, all right, and put it magnetized. It'll hold on to the blade, and you can tilt it to the 9 degrees. Okay? Now that's piece that I'm passing around. You'll see that it's equal width. All right? It's a straight piece. But this piece here is not cut like that. This is another one. And it's cut with thinner pieces. All right? They're not 3 inches wide. When I turned this piece here, it took me forever because the pieces were this wide, you know? And to turn that out on the inside, I was like, you know, making sawdust all over the place. So I figured I'd try a narrower one and how to cut that. It's not as straightforward as this. 9-degree cut, zap it, you know, it's all set. I have Woodturner Pro software, and if you put in, you're cutting a stave, and you put in the dimensions, it asks you 2 dimensions. The outside diameter at the top and the outside diameter at the bottom. Okay, and the thickness of the wood. And it will tell you the angles that you have to cut. Well, this particular piece here, all right, the outside diameter I said was 7, and the inside diameter was going to be 3. Excuse me, the lower outside diameter was going to be 3, and this was going to be 7, okay, on this here. It gave me, you know, the board width that you need, the board thickness, and all of that. But it told me that I needed a miter angle of 1.67 and a blade tilt of 4.18. Now that's because it, again, has 40 pieces in it, and the blade tilt for these 40 was 9 degrees. This is 4.18. I doubled it, 8.36, because I only want to make one cut, okay? And the blade tilt, all right, 1.67. Now, that's on each side. I doubled that, okay, 3.34. How could you ever cut something without cutting your fingers off doing that? This is a jig that I use. Now, this is a jig, I have a saw stop because I cut my thumb off once and I don't want to do it again. And this fits into the miter slot on my saw stop, okay? This edge here, I made this piece, I put it in, and the saw rip this edge here. So this edge is perfectly parallel to the blade and the miter gauge slot. All right? Cuts 0, that's it. This here, I have 2 pieces of track, T-track, bought at Rockland. They sell all kinds of that stuff. So there's one here, and a slot cut in the bore in this, so that I can slide, it moves up and down and in and out, so I can set the angle on this. I turn, this is 0 here, and I just adjust this to the angle that I want. In this case, it's, the miter angle was 8.36. All right, how do you do that? Well, essentially, you guess at the first one, okay? You take a protractor, all right, and you put it on your board, and you mark 9 degrees or whatever it's going to be. And now, if you look closely at this, here's the angle. The further I move it back, the wider the piece is that I'm going to cut. Well, if you look at these here, they're fairly thin. They're about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch wide. So, rather than fool with something like that, I leave the blade vertical, okay? And I'll set the degree angle first. At, the miter angle is 3.34, okay? And I'll get it set to that angle. Make a cut, take my Wexley measuring gauge, put it down on the table, take my Wexley, put it down on the table in the spot where I'm going to put it, get it on 0, click it, set it to 0, and then set it on top of the wood. All right? Now the Wexley can be a little bit precarious because if it's not angled right, all right, it's not going to work right. So I'll always take a board, you know, and put it down on the table, put my piece against it, and let the Wexley hit this so that it's going to be, you know, parallel to the piece that I'm measuring, like this. I need some kind of backup for it. Not something thin, it has to be thicker and higher. So you get your angle. Let's say it comes out to 5 degrees. Well, I'll knock it in a little bit. Eventually, what I want to do with this is I want to put some lines on it. 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, you know, project it out from a point so that I can just adjust it. This is a jig in process. Yeah. So you get this adjusted, okay? Then you'll set your piece on it like this, tilt the blade, you'll set the piece on the edge like this, tilt the blade, this is again another scrap piece, and make your cut. Now, this can be a little precarious, so what I have here is another piece of T-track, all right? Slides back and forth, it's adjustable, and I will always, if you look close here, you see there's a piece screwed onto it, onto the top itself. That's the thickness of the wood. A little bit thinner than the thickness of the wood, just a little bit. Okay? And I'll put the wood on there, it'll line up to the top, and then I can tighten it down with this. All right? And it holds it in place, and I will have some kind of a backstop here, and C-clamp to hold it in place. And if need be, I would use a push stick, not a piece of metal push stick, but a wood push stick to hold it in there, okay? And push it through, right? Now, the trick is, and I learned this today, actually, I want to make a piece that's double the thickness that I need. So if I cut here, and I cut this one like this, I want the piece that falls off to be another piece. I want to make 2 at the same time, all right? And all you have to do is account for your saw cut when you do that. The saw cut's 3/32, so you have to adjust it a little bit. Again, cut scrap pieces to get it right. And then you cut all 40 pieces, you've got 20 little rectangles like this, and you can cut 40 pieces. Bang it right out. Okay. And I've always been it worries me that the angle that we're cutting here isn't perfect. Well, guess what? Because of the way we're tilting it, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you're doing this, and you've got 12 pieces, and you don't have 15 degrees on each one, it's not going to fit together. You got to sand and touch it up and do this and that. Over here, all you got to do is twist it a little more, push it down, let it up, okay? Take a piece out, put a piece in, and you can fool with it to get it right. And after I learned that, I became much more confident and well, let's just try this one, Again, I'm using poplar. It cost me $1 something a foot, and it's, fairly inexpensive, so I can play with it, okay? Once you decide how you're going to make your pieces, either you're going to make it big like this, then you have to make a cone. Now, let me pass this around so you can all take a look at it and get some idea of what I'm talking about. The cone, all right, is used to open it up at the top and to allow you to change the configuration on the angle. All right? So if I bang this cone in, all right, look what happens. It stays there. What the heck is holding it in place? Rubber bands. In the article, it tells you to use 15 rubber bands on the bottom and 15 rubber bands on the top. I found that it's very difficult to change the position if you do that. So I put like 3 or 4 on the top and 3 or 4 on the bottom just to get an idea of what I wanted. Then it's much easier to configure, right? The other thing, when you're banging up, when you're pushing this down and whatnot, that it will move around, okay? You have to make sure that you keep it down. So you have to keep tapping it down. And because of the friction, where the two pieces are coming together, you might move it and it looks like it's good. You always have to tap it in so that it's touching the outside diameter of your cone. Now, to do this, you need multiple cones for multiple size bowls, all right? Again, I glue up some poplar and turn it, and that's that, okay? But if we try to fiddle and push, no, it says tap it in. So when you tap it, the pieces are kind of, rubbing together and going where they should be. When you push it, it doesn't necessarily do that. But when you tap it, it kind of jiggles it and brings it in tight. And then they tell you to take a 2/1000 feeler gauge and stick it in, okay? And run it down to see how tight it is. This article was written by a Robert Craig, okay? He was a retired aerospace research engineer. So, he was a mathematical genius, obviously, and he, figured out how to do this without using calculus, which is good because I never took calculus in high school, so I'm out of that. But this makes it, very interesting, and you can make very interesting pieces like this, okay? This is my first piece, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this to the club and we can sell it and maybe make some money for our video system. Yeah. But I think that when I go to do it again, I would use, instead of pieces that are the same width, in other words, I made 40 pieces, I made 20 cherry and 20 Peruvian walnut. I would make 40, this is maple, I'm sorry, not cherry. I would use 40 pieces of one wood and then insert a different color spacer. Therefore, it would accent the main wood more, okay? I mean, this is nice. I mean, you can see it. When you look inside of it, you know, it looks like it's spinning almost, you know, with the turn. But that's my own personal preference. I think that's what I'm going to do on the next one. And the fact is here, using the elastic bands, Staples has these. They're number 8 or 64 or 84. 64 and 84 plastic bands for $6, you get 90 of them. That's a bag like this, you know, and they're very strong. The first time I did this, I used the plastic bands we had hanging around the house, and I ended up shooting them across the room, going everywhere, you know. And buy the good ones, okay? They're much stronger, and they don't chafe when you're sliding them on the wood, you know, whereas the cheap ones, the first time I put it on, I had like 8 on there, and I pushed it up a little bit, they went, blew up on me, so don't do that. Use the good ones.
Where did you get the good ones?
Please?
Where?
Staples.
Oh, Staples has them.
Staples has, you get a bag of plastic bands, and you know, they're very, very strong. I've been using these now for a week, you know, playing with different, you know, different ones. When you do it, and when you first time you put them together, it's a little, it's kind of like juggling, right? Because you'll get 3 or 4 together, and you know, they'll fall out.
Can you talk about the gluing process? How do you?
Okay, all right. I haven't got that far yet, but you know, when you go to put it together, you're going to notice that it's hard to do. Not if you have something to balance it against. The way I glued these up, I only glued 20 at a time. I did half, all right? And essentially, I laid them all out flat. I used, you know,
Tight bond?
Tight bond, number 2, you know, a lot of people suggest number 1's better. I use number 2 because it lasts a little longer drying time. And I spread it out thin. I use it's not a squeegee, it's a plastic, it's not a scraper, it's a piece of plastic used to spread glue evenly, all right? It's like, it's like a,
You got to rub a roller on it? Or
no roller, it's just a straight piece of plastic.
Okay.
And it gives you an even coat throughout. I mean, if you're interested in thousandths of an inch, you have to worry about it. If you're not, like really not with this, you don't have to be too careful. You want to make sure you cover the whole thing with a thin coat of glue. So I do 20, I lay it out, fold them all together. Now, when I do the 20, the other 20 are still sitting up here. How do they stay up there? I put this in, I put the elastic bands around this and holds them in place. Okay? Therefore, the other 20 is not falling down on me. All right? And I'll take them 5 at a time, rub them together, drop them in. Pull the elastic out, drop it in. Rub it together, pull the elastic out, drop it in. Okay? And until it gets where it is, all right? Where the 20 is done. And then you take big band clamps. You know, you can buy these at Benny's or any place that sells band clamps. And one on the top, one on the bottom, and if you're really worried about it, one in the middle. And glue it. And like I said, I only do 20 at a time, and the reason for that is the glue dries too fast. Yeah, you could do it, but I mean, this glue sets in an hour, right? So it's half, you know, it's half glued, all right? In an hour, I glue the other half and put it all together, and it's done. And you know, I mean, my wife says I'm a cellar dweller. I work in my man cave, you know, and a lot of people don't want to come down there and work with me, you know, because it's too tedious.
Alex, how do you turn it?
What's that?
How do you turn it?
Well, once you get it all glued up, okay? And this is a little cumbersome because you've got to have something flat now. It's got to be flat. There are two things you can do, and essentially, all right, I would do this again if I did this. That piece that I'm passing, that I passed around, where'd it go? No, the piece of wood. Okay. What I would do with this, okay, the next time I go to do it, is I would take my grading implement, okay, and you can actually draw the can't draw it out. You can actually draw the curvature of what you're doing, all right? And I would cut the inside out, all right? Cut it big, a quarter of an inch, half an inch bigger, all right? And then when you go to glue it together, you'll be able to deal with this without turning all this inside stuff forever, okay? You can actually cut that shape that you want to end up with, which is this, okay? I still work with a drawing board, mechanical drawing, you know, with a compass and whatnot. I always draw out the shape that I'm going to do and that I want physically, so I know what it's going to look like, all right? You can sketch it if you're not comfortable with spending all that time. And when you sketch it, of course, you know, make it an inch wide, and then you've got more than enough to, you know, take up enough wood to turn later. But if you cut this off on the inside and then glue it together, it's going to be much easier to turn in the first place. And if you cut this off towards the bottom, I'm going to tell you why. It's going to be easier. Yes, sir.
How does the cone work if you've got that, the inside is missing?
It isn't necessary because you've already got, you draw your circle around here and you know how they're all going to fit together. Okay? And they will, you know, get that, that curvature. I see what you say the problem might be. The cone might not work out as easily. So again, I haven't done it yet. I'm going to try this. Okay? I'm going to see how it works.
You say you're using 40 pieces.
Yes.
And you pull one out with a little crack, right?
You crack in the inside, you take one out.
Okay. Now, in that case, if you're using multi-colors like you've got there,
Yes.
don't you put two colors together?
Okay. That's why if you go with a laminate, you know, like a thin piece,
Yeah.
no, because you've got a thin piece on each side of each one.
Just take out the piece and the
You
laminate.
take the piece and the laminate out
You
together.
take one piece of the dark color all the way?
No. If you were doing this,
Yeah.
you'd have a hard time taking them out, putting it back.
Right.
You have to take two.
You have to take two.
You have to take two.
Right.
But if you're doing it with a single color and an eighth or a quarter inch glued up,
You'll never see it.
yeah, there's no problem with that.
Alex, question.
I guess I don't understand how, once you set your shape like this,
Yes.
I mean, what's next? Before you start gluing, how do you register that shape so that when you glue it, you end up with the same shape?
In the directions, okay, it tells you how to go about making this. And essentially, all right, essentially what you've got here is a piece of threaded rod and a piece of threaded rod and two angled pieces. How do you do that? How do you get that? Cutting the inside out would kill you because you couldn't do this if you cut the inside out like I suggested. All right, so that might not be a good suggestion. But in order to figure out how to do that, okay, you measure up from the bottom 3/4 of an inch, so you've got a 3/4 of an inch space. You take an inside caliper and you put it in there and you measure, notice, there's nothing holding this in place now, all right? I took it out, it didn't close up or whatnot, all right? So it's going to stay in that position because of the elastics. You'd set the caliper to the length of the top, the width of the top, 2 3/8. Get it to the width of the top on the top one, all right, whatever it is, all right, 4 1/4. Draw down the center line, 4 1/4 on the top, 2 3/8 on the bottom, all right, which means 1 3/16 on one side for the bottom, all right, and 4 1/4 or 2 1/4. Draw the angle and measure it with your protractor. All right. Set your tape, your bandsaw to whatever angle. I think this one here was 38 degrees. Cut your circles out on the angles. All right. The distance in between is the distance from top of this to top of that. Notice there are bolts there. Now what they had me do, and in the directions you'll see that, they had the bottom one hard bolted in, and they had the top one with a bolt on the top and a space bolt on the bottom, all right? I didn't like that, and I found that it was hard to adjust it and hard to manipulate it, so I left the bolt off on the bottom. I got this one set the way I wanted it, and put this in, and then I can tighten this down, and as I do, I can tighten it down to the point where everything on the angles is tight. Now, your gluing process becomes even easier with this. Put the band clamps on it, and that's it, done.
Alex, how do you fix it onto the lathe to turn it?
Okay, I had a problem making this flat. How the heck do you do it? Well, I happen to have an 8-inch joiner, and I put it on the joiner like this. All right, I tilted the fence so that it rubbed up against it, and I ran it through the joiner to get it flat. Glued the bottom on it. I use face plates. All right, I glued the bottom on it with a fake, a piece that I could tunnel off afterwards. Put it on the face plate, turn it on the lathe.
So you make it a little thicker because of the screw?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, the piece that goes on the face plate is like 1 1/8 inches,
Okay.
okay? And this piece here, whatever I want to make it, I just glue that on.
The inside is darkwood,
Yes.
and the outside is the light wood on the bottom. How did you get that?
Okay, good question. I almost forgot this. Before I put this on, after I planed it, I took a 2.5 inch bit, okay, and put it in my drill press, and I drilled into it about, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 2.5 inches diameter, okay? And the dark wood here is end grain, okay, because all this that's running into is all end grain. So I made the dark wood on the bottom, 3 strips of whatever I wanted to use, glued together, all right, end grain. And put that in with this. So I was able to glue the dark piece to the bottom of this maple piece and then insert it in. Now there was a cylinder in there that I had drilled for the dark piece to go in, which gave me more gluing capability. Okay? And then this piece is bigger than the dark piece, and it gets face to face. Again, end grain, this piece, this one.
How do you get the clamps to stay where you put them?
Which clamps?
The round ones.
The band clamps? The wood is, it just grabs into it, really. I mean, if I take this clamp here, and I put it right on the edge, like that, got it a little deeper so it won't fall off. It's not going anywhere. There is a trick to keeping the elastics on. If you look closely at this, I'll pass this around now so you'll be able to see it. All right. In the edge of the top, I put little brads so that the elastics wouldn't slide. The elastics are the hard thing to keep in place. The clamps, no problem. They don't move because they bite into the wood. But the elastics, I put little pins on the bottom and the top so that I could keep the elastics in position. That's the idea. This article, this August of 2014 in AAW, if you read that article, that's the one I'm passing around. That's page 24 through 36, okay, in the article. I mean, in the magazine, there's 10 pages for the article. It tells you exactly what you have to do. The only problem that it's a little nebulous about, it says, okay, you know, you can glue this up. About putting it together, it was a learning process for me on how to go about it. I mean, things were falling all over the place and whatnot. Then I realized I had to put the little pins in it so that elastics didn't move, you know. But beside that, it's a good article. It's very well done. And it would show you how to do it if you were interested. Okay? Yes?
If you didn't have a joint plate like you do on
You
yours,
could sand it.
could I, no, could you, once it's all glued up,
Yes.
could you put it in a cold drawers and turn the bottom flat
Yes.
that way?
Yes, you could do that.
Which you would.
Yes. Yeah, you could do that. I just, you know, I was looking for different ways to do it and as fast as I could, you know, because I didn't start doing that piece until Monday. I've been in Iceland for a week, so we just got back on Saturday, so I was a little bit time lagged and read all the emails that we didn't have a, you know, a demo person, so I called and I said, yeah, I could probably do this. Got it done? How's that? Anything else I can tell you about? I got this in my head. I was telling somebody outside. You know, I looked at this article and I got it in my head, and yeah, that looks interesting. I just couldn't get it out, so that's why I decided to try it. So, no more questions.
All set? Any other questions? Good job.
Very well.